Wow. Hey, pura vida, mi gente. I'm going to read from this book right here, real quick, just to corroborate. It says The Natural History of Man, comprising inquiries into the modifying influence of physical and moral agencies of the different tribes of the human family, by James Cowles Pritchard. All right. And this is volume 1, all the way 1855. The Jews of Portugal are very dark. The Jews of Portugal are very dark. Again, the Jews of Portugal are very dark. All right, we're going to be talking about the Spaniard and Sephardic Jews of Portugal, and how I'm going to, been letting you know, a lot of these became Huguenots. A lot of these ended up in Holland, the Netherlands, becoming known as Dutch and having influence in the West Indian Company and the trade around the world, the ships and everything, and pirates, merchants. Again, these same people we're talking about were very dark-skinned people, so-called Negroes. It says Shakespeare and the Jews. This is the 20th anniversary edition from James Shapiro. All right, scholarly source here. You can dig on it. All right, and we're about on page 171 of this book. And it says here, the accumulated experience of over 100 years of travel, trade, and conquest had convinced Europeans that some of the accepted stereotypes of Jewish racial otherness, including the belief that the Jews were black, needed to be qualified when William Brereton jotted down his impressions of the Jews in the synagogue in Amsterdam in 1635. Amsterdam, again, that's in the Netherlands, Holland, all right? The Dutch, this is the Dutch synagogue, Dutch people, right? Amsterdam, 1635. He's going to let you know that he noted that the Jewish men are most black. They're most black. The Jews. Who was the Jews? Again, who was the Jews that were in Amsterdam? Most of those Jews, all right, had fled from Spain and Portugal. Sephardic Jews who were what? Most black. Remember, the Portuguese were very dark. We already read that. All right, you see the corroboration. And when the Scottish minister Robert Kirk toured London in January 1690, he also paid a visit to the synagogue there. Now, this is a whole other different country. Right now, he's in England. Now, a whole different person, letting you know what he saw when he went in the synagogue, the Jewish synagogue in London. All right, in 1690. He observed over 200 Jews worshiping. 200. All right, 200 people, 200 Jews. He noted in his journal that they were all very black men. Again, Jews worshiping in a synagogue in London. They were what? All very black men. All very black men. Sephardic Jews. Who was in London as a Jew? A lot of these, again, were Sephardic Moorish Jews from Portugal and Spain. I read from this book also to corroborate what I'm letting you know, what the general consensus, right? Remember, he was telling us the general consensus during these times. All right, this book is called A System of Geography, or a descriptive, historical, and philosophical view of the several quarters of the world and of the various empires, kingdoms, and republics which they contain, particularly detailing those alterations which have been introduced at the recent revolutions. From 1805, all right, 1805, 49 of this book. And notwithstanding this, it is argued we find them in different parts of the world, of all colors. Jews, what? Jews of all colors. They're come in every color. The English Jew is white. The Portuguese Jew is swarthy, so-called black. The Portuguese Jew, swarthy, very dark. Portuguese, again, another source. The American Jew, olive. And the Arabian Jew, copper colored. But they're letting us know in this source from 1805. Portuguese Jews, swarthy. All right, I'm going to read from this book real quick. It says Jews and Blacks in the Early Modern World by Jonathan Scorch. All right, Jews and Blacks. But down here it says, towards the latter end of the 18th century, one finds the same changeability of Jews expressed in updated nuances in geographic context. The Reverend Samuel Stanhope Smith wrote that the Jews are fair in Britain and Germany, brown in France. The Jews are what? They're brown skin. They're brown in France, French, Huguenots, and in Turkey, swarthy, in Portugal. So brown in France and Turkey, and swarthy, or so-called black, in Portugal and Spain. They're black in Portugal and Spain. The Jews are black in Portugal and Spain, swarthy, black. Olive in Syria and in Chaldea, tawny or copper colored in Arabia and Egypt. All right, so different shades, all right, of complexion, the Jews. All right, again, another source here. It says, while such views may be passed off as mere descriptive statements about the darkness of Sephardic Jews, the darkness of Sephardic Jews. Sephardic Jews are what? So-called black. They have dark skin. Remember that the Jews of Portugal and Spain, which are the Sephardic Jews, all right, are so-called black. We already got a lot of references, different books. They soon connected intimately with prescriptive notions based on the significance of physiological or racial characteristics. Thus, in 1750, petition from Kingston, Jamaica, Christians objecting to a recent attempt by Jewish landowner to vote, presented the following argument. It says, though a mulatto of the fourth descent may vote at elections, yet the Jews, many of whom are mulattoes of that degree, are by our wise legislation absolutely excluded from that privilege. It says, note the lack of stability in the Jews' color and the overlap of cultural and physiological otherness. Many of the Jews were mulattoes of the fourth degree, that is, very light-skinned blacks. Jews, light-skinned blacks, and hence should have been permitted to vote, but Jews were not Christians. Unlike mulattoes, the religious exclusion of Jews put them on the level of mulattoes and blacks. Jews both were and were not blacks, were and were not whites. These various views of Jews branded them in David Rodiger's terminology as not yet white.
This is a great book we've gone into a lot of. We're going to go ahead and get into this book again. It's called Jews and Muslims in British Colonial America, A Genealogical History. This is by Elizabeth Hirschman and Donald Yates.
Again, chapter 1, map makers, privateers, and promoters. The year 1492 saw one door closed on Iberian Jews and Muslims, and another open an ocean away. Hey guys, there's a whole land over there that's meant for us. It's promised to us. It's prophecy. Remember, Columbus was on a mission to find the holy city and recover Mount Zion, promised land. That year witnessed 3 events in Spain that had sweeping implications for the colonization of the New World. The first was the fall of Muslim Granada to the Christian Reconquista. Islamic rule in the Iberian Peninsula came to an abrupt end after nearly 800 years. 800 years. Are you saying they didn't multiply? You didn't multiply in 800 years? Where did all these Muslims go? In Spain, people of color, where did they go? You know, Islamic rule. Second, a royal edict of expulsion was issued aimed at Spain's Jewish population. It gave them 3 months. You got 3 months to get out of here. Later extended to 6 to convert. All right, to convert to Christianity or leave, the realm, their property confiscated. Third was the voyage of Christopher Colon in search of a transatlantic passage to China and the Indies. Yeah, right, we know the fake story. On periphery of these events, the same year brought such developments as the death of the founder of the first modern state, Lorenzo the Magnificent, Grand Duke of Tuscany, invasion of Italy by the French King Charles VIII, with the consequence that Renaissance began to spread northward. Secularization and decline of the papacy with the ascension of the infamous Borgia, Pope Alexander VI. All right, the Borgias, the first mafias, right? The Borgias. Who's Cesare Borgia? You guys know who Cesare Borgia is? The Pope's grandson, Cesare Borgia. That's the face you're praying to. That's the Jesus you're praying to. Okay, so it says, and construction of German mapmaker Martin Bayham of the first globe. All these occurrences made for a defining moment in European history. It was a turning point that spelled the death throes of the catastrophic Christian Middle Ages and harbinger of the birth of the modern era. Expansive horizons now beckon to all people. Secular forms of government were emerging. New currents of pluralism were afoot. Whether Jews helped cause this groundswell of change or represented merely one contributory factor, they certainly participated in the course of events and benefited from the promising new opportunities. They were at the forefront of discovery, exploration, and settlement of the new lands in the West. All right, we already got this. We got this in the whole nations of the world videos, right? Who was colonizing? Who was also being brought over here as servants? We already got my two right bound for America videos, indentured servitude. Who was really being brought over here? Right? There's a real story. Both academic studies and informal family histories attest that many of the Spanish and Portuguese colonists in Central America and South America, Mexico, and the Caribbean were conversos and moriscos. And I, for one, have no shame to telling you right now that's hearing me, because I know I've been finding it in a lot of people's genealogy, and I know the true history of most so-called African Americans, that I can attest that I have run into these Portuguese Moriscos and conversos in my ancestry, blending in and marrying into the royal Indian families, indigenous families that were here. That's how they got the land. That's how they made themselves worthy over here, by marrying and taking the daughters or the wives of the chiefs. Shout out to rest in power, my ancestor, King Garabito, and my other ancestors too, the Sephardic Moorish Jews that came. And a lot of this is in your blood. You gotta, whether you want to accept it or not, although they might appear to be good Catholic Christians on the surface, they were in reality crypto-Jews and crypto-Muslims. Yes, crypto-Muslims, yes. Secret Jews and secret Muslims. They practice the traditions of Judaism. Who are they talking about? The Spanish and Portuguese colonists in Central and South America, Mexico, and the Caribbean. They were secret Jews, secret Muslims. All right, break the spell. These were the conquistadors that you were saying the white man came and got us. No, these were the same people. More on more war. They practiced the traditions of Judaism and Islam in the privacy of their own homes, sometimes in small de facto communities or intermarried family groups. Both Judaic and Islamic law excuse this behavior on grounds that such temporizers were constrained to submit to political pressures to save life and property. The earliest martyrs to the commandment of the Torah requiring Jews to declare themselves as separate and set apart from other people were called annuism, forced ones. The Inquisition rolled out a dragnet complete with tip sheets, rewards, and public spectacles, and feared out to the fest Judaizers as well as Moriscos were burned at the stake as heretics. Spain's Muslim population survived longer than its Jews, but the final wave of extraction for them came in 1614. Sorry, Muslims, you had to leave by 1614. Where did they go? Who are they today? They left in droves for safe havens in the lowlands of England and Ottoman Empire. The grisly machinery of the Holy Office was not shut down for good until 1822. The Spanish government did not permit Jews to return officially or become citizens until the Franco regime in the 1940s and 1950s. But proscription of the Jewish practices and beliefs had never been perfect. Rules were relaxed from time to time and from place to place. King Manuel of Portugal welcomed thousands of Jewish exiles across the border and tolerated openly Jewish subjects in his realm until 1497. King Manuel, but then what happened in 1497? Navarre was long an exception to the persecution of Jews. Local enforcement of anti-Semitic laws across Spain and Portugal was shifting and uneven. Officials often concluded in protecting persons of Jewish and Muslim ancestry who were important to the smooth function of the state. In truth, the three cardinal events mentioned above are interwoven, for historians have identified 5 Jews among the 90 sailors in Columbus' expedition. All of them were probably intent not only on finding the riches of the East Indies, but also on escaping religious persecution at home. The man we know as Columbus was in all likelihood of Jewish ancestry. All likelihood. Yeah, we know, Mr. Sarko. He is believed to have been a descendant of Spanish Jews. All right. No, not Cologne. We believe Sarko Portuguese Jews who had converted and moved to Genoa following the massacre of the 1391. But the Cologne people letting you know the drop that the Colognes are even, they're Jewish anyways. They're Sephardic Jews anyways. The prominent historian Salvador de Madariaga wrote an authoritative biography in which he came to this conclusion, and Nazi hunter Simon Weissenfeld's book Sails of Hope popularized the idea. Among other clues, Weissenfeld drew attention to Columbus' use of Hebrew ciphers and his private correspondence with his son Diego. In a letter to Diego de Deza, the tutor Prince Juan, moreover, Columbus wrote, "I am a servant of the same Lord who raised up David." A curious allusion, according to Wiesenthal. Historians speculate that the first European to sight land on October 12, 1492, was also Jewish. The sailor Juan Rodriguez Bermejo, all right, Bermejo means red. The Bermejo Sea was the Gulf of California, which is the Red Sea, right? Bermejo Sea, Red Sea. Called Rodrigo de Triana, left Spain upon Columbus' return and entered the service of the Moors in Morocco. Moors in Morocco. His name and memory are honored today by American Jews for whom the story of the auspicious beginnings is a point of immense pride. Hundreds of Jews exiled from Spain and Portugal followed Bermejo and made a name for themselves as the Jewish pirates of the Caribbean. Okay, the Jewish pirates of the Caribbean, right? Jewish pirates of the Caribbean, as author Edward Chrysler calls them, including Moroccan-born Samuel Palachi, a pirate rabbi. Samuel Palachi, famous pirate. Again, people of color, so-called black people, so-called black pirates. Straight up, black pirates. Straight up.
Book Christopher Columbus and the Participation of the Jews in the Spanish and Portuguese Discoveries by Dr. M. Kaiser Ling. This was written in 1894. And we're in chapter 6 here. It says, after the Spanish monarchs had expelled all the Jews from all their kingdoms and lands in January, in that same month.
All right, so again, let's not forget, we just went over the information when we're talking about Jews. You know, we're talking about in Spain and Portugal, we're talking about swarthy, so-called black Jews, black people, so-called black, yeah. Dark complexion, very, I'm sure there was many shades of that, you know, light skin to very dark skin. But we got the descriptions. There was a general consensus that these people were so-called swarthy, so-called black, mainly in Spain, the Iberian Sephardic Jews and Muslim Moors.
Among the explorers' companions whose names have come down to us, the complete list is lost, according to them, right? They don't want us to know who was there. There were several men of Jewish stock. For example, Luis de Torres, again, here we go. Luis de Torres, right? Remember, he was the interpreter. It says, a Jew who had occupied a position under the governor of Murcia and who was baptized shortly before Columbus sailed. As he understood Hebrew, Chaldee, and some Arabic, Columbus employed him as interpreter. Again, another source, as interpreter. So they knew they were going to the old world. So he brought this person, Luis de Torres, just in case, because he knew many languages, but especially Hebrew, because we'll see later that Columbus was looking for the Grand Khan or the Prester John, right?
From this book, History of the Conquest of Spain by the Arab Moors, okay, with a sketch of the civilization which they achieved and impaired to Europe by Henry Copey. I'm going to go to page 445 in this book, and it talks about Columbus, what his name really meant, the Christ bearer, because he brought the Christ, right? How he brought only evil to the Aborigines in America, and that to him, what he dispensed of Moorish civilization was only good, right? Moorish civilization. His vessel was fitted out in the little port of Palos, which had lately been a Moorish port. His sailors were many of them men with Moorish blood in their veins, okay? It has been asserted, when the Moors were driven out, thousands took refuge in the south of France, who afterwards, abhorring the Roman Catholic persecutions, became Huguenots. All right? Who became Huguenots? The Moors. When? when they got kicked out of Portugal and Spain, that ended up in southern France. There, all right, they became known as Huguenots. Okay, who are the Huguenots? Moorish people. Huguenots, Moors, Huguenots, Moors, Huguenots, Moors. You guys clear? And that of these, many emigrated at a later date to South Carolina. All right.
Jews and Muslims in British colonial America, a genealogical history.
The focal point of the present work, however, is not the southern or central portions of the Americas, not the Spanish and Portuguese colonies in the Americas. A case will be made here for crypto-Jewish and crypto-Muslim presence in British North America. So they was just letting us know, the drop in colonial Spanish America, but they want to focus on British North America, okay? I'm sure that's what you guys want to know about, right, too, a little bit. We propose that many of the initial colonists in Virginia, listen to this, all right? All right, music, DJ, music. All right, get ready. Ready? Yeah. We propose that many of the initial colonists in Virginia, South Carolina, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, and Maryland were of Jewish and Moorish descent. The colonists, what white man? What you talking about, the white man? My ancestors told me the white man came. What white man? What you talking about, white man? Prove he was a white man. If not Jewish and Moorish self-identification or public labeling as such. Appendix A present an abundance of source material concerning Jewish surnames. All right, do the history, do the research. The question of any given individual's religious adherence can be bracketed for the time being. At any rate, each claim about religion has to be answered on a case-by-case basis, and very little research has been completed on the varieties of the Jewish religious experience in colonial America. Appendix B, rituals and practices of the secret Jews. And Appendix C, Muslim rituals and beliefs, contain a mixture of religious traditions and social customs. What is central to our inquiry is ancestry. We suggest Dutch New Amsterdam, later British New York and New Jersey, harbored and sometimes welcomed people of Jewish ancestral origins and affinities. And, the Lenape people know, they have this in their ancestry. They know what I'm talking about. Although the historical backdrop to these developments may be familiar, some salient events are worth repeating, beginning with pogroms in Barcelona in 1391 and increasingly a century later when Inquisition tribunals were established throughout Spain. Sephardic Jews made their way by the thousands to France, all right? They made their way to France, the Netherlands, Switzerland, Germany, Austria, and Britain, all right? And they became known as those people. So they became known as French, Dutch, Swiss, Germans, Austrians, Britons, or English people. A lot of them were what? Moorish Sephardic Jews. Once denounced or exposed in their homeland, Jews were not allowed to immigrate to Spanish possessions in the New World. Although many went there as new Christians or conversos, you had to convert or you had to call yourself a Christian. You had to be a crypto. You had to be in secret. Get it? Crypto. Beginning in 1492, the Muslims of Spain and Portugal were likewise forced to accept conversion to Christianity or flee their homes. Unlike their Jewish counterparts, they were not explicitly forbidden to immigrate to New Spain. Their influence in the Americas is largely unstudied and certainly unappreciated. I definitely agree with that. The death knell for them came in 1609 when several 100,000 Moriscos remaining in Spain and Portugal were declared undesirables. Remember what they were doing to all of Europe's undesirables? Whoever was claimed undesirable, remember what happened? They were sent to the plantations as indentured servants. They were sent as servants, indentured servants, undesirables to the plantations of America. And what happened? They became known as so-called Negroes, eventually Africans. Because why? They're Moriscos. What is a Morisco? It's a Muslim who converted to Christianity. But really, in reality, they were just secret Christians, crypto Muslims. crypto-Muslim. That's what a Morisco is. A crypto-Muslim who was being sent to the and exiled into the plantations. Undesirable. They were labeling them undesirables. They left in droves for non-Catholic lands, many settling as merchants. Who's the merchants? Pay attention. Remember, we got this in my Nations of the World videos. We broke down who were the merchants. We already know this. Let's not go, backwards. We know, and it's correlating right here. Many of them became what? The merchants. And why am I emphasizing this? Because you're going to find a lot of merchants in your genealogy. And these merchants, you're going to see a lot of them have Hebrew names. Benjamin Walker, Isaac Walker, Judah, Jacob Walker, Levi Walker. And they happen to be merchants in South Carolina, Pennsylvania, Virginia, and all these other places. And guess what? Put two and two together when you're doing the genealogy. You're going to see these are people of color. It's not going to state so. It's not going to state it. Back in these old times, they didn't even have the color. They didn't deal with color back then. Before 1870s, they stopped doing that. 1870s, some of the census still have color. Some of the 1860s still have it, but most of them don't. They white it out, or they left that part blank. They want us to think they left it blank, but why would they print a census with that column if they're not going to use it? So I believe they were whiting out a lot of these census so you can think these are white people. My theory and opinion right there. Sometimes I do give opinions, right? So although the bulk of these refugees fled to North Africa and Ottoman Turkish lands, that's not proven. Thousands of others sought safety in France and Low Countries as Protestantism swept across Western Europe. Just like the same time these Moriscos, Sephardic people, are going to England and other parts of Europe, France, the Low Countries, Protestantism is sweeping across Western Europe all of a sudden. Protestantism goes hand in hand when we're talking about Muslim Moors and Sephardic Jews. We know this, right? Many of these Jewish conversos and Moriscos became often only outwardly Protestant. Only outwardly. They declare themselves Protestants. That way they can get the Catholics off their backs. They were protesting though. Protesting, Protestant, protesting. The Catholics swelling the ranks of the dissenters. Some even provided leaders for the Huguenots. Who? Let's go back. Moriscos. Moriscos. Simple. Let's keep it very simple. Right? What is a Morisco? Morisco. Spanish for Moorish. Spanish for Moorish. Moorish were former Muslims and their descendants from the Roman Catholic Church that the Spanish crown commanded to convert to Christianity, or compulsory exile after Spain outlawed the open practice of Islam by its sizable Muslim population. Moriscos became what? Protestants, who became what? Leaders of Huguenots, who became what? Hussites, who became Anabaptists, the Baptists, who became Calvinists, who became German Reformed, who became Walloons, Mennonites, Dunkards and Quakers, Puritans, Presbyterians, who? Moriscos, Moorish for Spanish, Moorish, right? Morisco. Moorish, Muslims, became Quakers, Puritans, Presbyterians. I don't know how to repeat this. I want you guys to understand this. So that's the hijack. When you're going into these ancestors and you're finding Quakers, the Kurimeo, I didn't know because they were Quakers, and well, what's wrong? What's wrong with being a Quaker? But some of these Quakers are what? Muslims of Spain and Portugal. Muslims, Moors, so-called black people. Yes, black. They want to keep saying this because I don't like dealing with crayon colors here. So-called black people, yes. Huguenots, Hussites, Anabaptists, Quakers, Dunkers, all that. When the British, Dutch, and French began establishing colonies of the Atlantic seaboard, they sent colonists, not subjects of high political and social rank from their respective countries, but for the most part recently arrived, patently anti-Catholic, newly minted Protestants. You see who they were sending? Many were debtors, prisoners, or servants. Like I was saying earlier, what was going on with all these so-called black people? They were being sent as prisoners of war, servants, debtors, cast-offs of society who were struggling to get onto their own feet in a new country.
All right. England's reliance on Iberian Jews to promote its interests abroad goes back as far as the Tudors. Henry VIII used Spanish Jewish lawyers, okay, to justify his divorce from Catherine of Aragon. One of them, an Italian banker, tapped for his shrewdness and knowledge of international law, was the ancestor of Oliver Cromwell. You see that? One of the Spanish Jewish lawyers, an Italian banker, Oliver Cromwell, protector of the Commonwealth. He had Sephardic crypto-Jewish heritage. Okay, Oliver Cromwell. Listen, in 1594, Rodrigo Lopez was Elizabeth's court physician. Rodrigo Lopez, these are all crypto-Jews, right, working for these people, right, and the Tudors. He was executed on charges of treason and plotting to poison her. The fledgling colony of Iberian Jews, exiled from England, found shelter mainly in Holland, all right? From when you know this, that became New Jerusalem. That's their haven, right? That's where they created the East India and West India companies. They got very successful and wealthy, and they took control of the trade in the world from Holland, where they found Amsterdam's significant Marrano community in 1598. They returned to England after a lapse of more than 300 years in 1664, when Amsterdam Rabbi Manasseh ben Israel, guy who said that, they're finding Indians, Jewish Indians, Hebrew Indians in America at that time, right? That's what he wrote about, the hope of Israel, Manasseh ben Israel. He lobbied Cromwell to allow Jews again in England. They're talking about them, though. They were provisionally but unofficially readmitted. Elizabeth's successor, James I, brought a Scottish and Stuart predisposition toward Jewish merchants and extended many privileges to Jews and native crypto or former Jews, okay? Sephardic Jews, again, these are all people of color. Listen, so-called black folks over here, right? These so-called cryptos, we just got the whole drop, right? As historians David Cesarani reminds us, London's Jews were uniquely both court Jews and port Jews, right? Running the trade all over the world, in Brazil and the Americas especially, since the capital was the seat of government as well as the center of England's maritime trade. Under Cromwell, London-based merchants such as Antonio Fernández Carvajal, Manuel Dormido, and Simón de Carceres, all right, they're working for Cromwell, listen, acted as valued counterintelligence agents against the Spanish. They were crypto-Jews working as spies against when they say Spanish, they mean the crown. And they represented the Catholics. So this is the Protestants or crypto-Jews versus the Catholics, right? Just like it's always been. Charles II sojourned among Dutch Jews, so-called Dutch. These are your black Dutch. In Amsterdam now, your Sephardic Jews who moved to Amsterdam became so-called Dutch during his exile in the Netherlands. So Charles II sojourned among the Dutch. Charles II, Black Charles II, right? You guys know the most recorded person to be, described as a black person, the most recorded royal is Charles II. We got so many sources proving it. His marriage to Catherine Braganza, right? We also got her description. She was also so-called black or dark complexion melanated woman, was brokered by the Portuguese Jewish merchants Duarte da Silva. Okay, they helped the wedding go down. Listen to what it's saying. Their involvement in history, crypto-Jews, these are black folks. Their involvement in all these historical people during this time in the British Isles and England and different countries, not just in Spain and Portugal, not just in North Africa, how they wanted us to think. They are the ones helping colonize, right? And it was Charles who granted religious liberty to Jews in 1673. You see why? Religious liberty to his crypto friends. Right? The influence of these marranos culminated in the Glorious Revolution when William III hired the Amsterdam-based firm of Machado and Pereira to provision his expedition to England. William also invited the family of Lopez Suazo to settle in England. He knighted Solomon de Medina, his most important army contractor and banker. In 1697, the number of Jew brokers in the financial district around the Tower Quarter in London was so great, they had to be limited by law to 12. They continued to monopolize the stock exchange and shipping insurance business. The Muslim presence in England was different. Muslims had a distinct identity and central geographical focus that clearly separated them from Christians. Consequently, few chose to settle in London or Amsterdam. It was the Tudors, in particular Queen Elizabeth, who first welcomed the Moors from Spain and the Mediterranean to England and encouraged English merchants to trade with them in North Africa and the Ottoman Empire. Like Jews, they were often pressed into military and intelligence actions. According to Nabil Matard in Turks, Moors, and Englishmen in the Age of Discovery, he says from 1575 to 1588, immigrants were repeatedly made to join in national defense, and in 1596, it was reported by the Fugger spy that the English fleet that attacked Cadiz had been accompanied by 5 galleys from Barbary, and that the English took with them to Barbary some of the ships they captured there. Evidently, the military cooperation between Britons and Moors covered both land and sea operations and was based on what seemed to be, although it was never formalized, a strategic alliance between London and Marrakesh. So yes, this literally happened. This was the Anglo-Moroccan alliance, which we have videos about, and Queen Elizabeth's allegiance to the Sultan and how they split the Americas, North and the Caribbean. He gave to the Morocco, and she took, North America for setting up plantations.
The Secret History of Elizabeth's Alliance with Islam. This is from National Geographic. You can take a look at that. All right, Anglo-Moroccan Alliance was established at the end of the 16th century and early 17th century between the kingdoms of England and Morocco. Commercial agreements had been reached by Queen Elizabeth I of England and the Moroccan Sultan Ahmad al-Mansur.
Okay, now continuing, it says not only did Moors travel to England on business, but some even decided to stay, converting to Anglicanism and marrying English women. In 1625, official records show 3 or 4 Turks or Moors in Exeter, 30 in Plymouth, 3 or 4 in Bristol, and 10 with Baronet Seymour, an English Jewish surname.
The Moorish names documented in England at the time are Hamid, from Muhammad. Hamid is Muhammad. Mansur, Mustain, Nusan, Ali, Muhammad Ali, Alu, Aleph, Walid, Walid, Wali, Rit, Wali, Balu, Bello. All right, so we went over this in the last video. One that stood out to me was Dodds and Dodo, Dodds, Doden, Dodds, and Wali, because I remember Walid, Wali, Dodds. That sounds like somebody in the Nation of Islam. WD Fard, right? Or AKA Wallace Dodd or Ford. Ed Montgomery's infamous 1963 LA Herald's Examiner article alleging W.D. Fard is really Wallace Dodd Ford, ex-felon and drug dealer. Photo on right that of Wallace Dodd. Dodd. Who's this Dodd? And I know Wally. Walid, Dodd. Wallace Dodd.
So it's also Dodden, Dodon, Dodir, Dodorit, etc., all from David. That comes from David. Sharif from Sharif, Arabic leader. That's what that means, like a sheriff. The word sheriff comes from Arabic. And Sidon. In turn, Englishmen like John Ward, James Proctor of Southampton, and Sir Francis Verney fraternized with the Muslims and converted to Islam. Contemporary pamphlets vilify them. The play by Robert Devorn, a Christian turned Turk, 1612, specifically targeted Ward, whose name was Arabicized to Wardija of the Rose, and whose flagship was manned by an Anglo-Turkish crew of 400 pirates. From these facts, we can see that the line between Christian and Muslim in England was far from clear-cut when the first American colonies were planted, okay? All the history they don't teach us, all the context they leave out. Colonial census records, genealogies, marital patterns, ship passenger lists, and DNA test results all combine to suggest that a high number of the earliest historically prominent colonial Americans were of Jewish and Muslim descent, okay? A high number of the earliest and historically prominent colonial Americans, not just anybody, okay? Prominent, historical prominent. Are you listening to me right now? They were of Jewish, and that's Sephardic Jewish and Moorish Muslim descent. Many of them may have practiced the faiths of their fathers and mothers in secret. That's why they're cryptos, okay? That's where the word crypto comes from. The crypto-Jews, crypto-Muslims. So they were conversos, but they were new Christians, but they were actually practicing their old faiths in secret before relocation to North America, and have been Jews in religious sense. Certainly, some openly returned to Judaism there after centuries of maintaining an underground existence. How did this happen? We have glanced at some of England's connections with Iberian Jews, but that is only half the story. The rest concerns its crypto or its own crypto-Jewish families, and the key to understanding them lies in Cornwall and Devon. These are the southwestern coastal sections of England, where, since the time of the Minoans and Phoenicians, so-called, right, they're coming from the Americas, so-called Minoans and Phoenicians from Atlantis, they brought the copper. The Minoans had the Michigan copper with them. Yeah, that's how we know they were coming from the Americas. In the early Bronze Age, tin and copper, like I just said, were smelted and transported to Gaul by these so-called Minoans and so-called Phoenicians, right? You just saw my day and night series, right? Did you guys just watch my day and night series? Who's the so-called Phoenicians? So Danites, Minoans, so-called Atlanteans, carrying copper, pure 100%, 99.9% copper, only found in Michigan. They got the ships, the sunken ships in the Mediterranean. With this copper, they traced back to Michigan. So they had the tin and copper that says here. They were smelted and transported to Gaul, ports in North Africa, and indeed all over the Mediterranean. Cornwall was the primary source in antiquity for tin oxide ore, mined in a number of alluvial deposits as pebbles and gravel in stream beds. Stream tinning gave way in early antiquity to underground mining in the larger granite veins in upland Cornwall and Devon. Recent DNA surveys of Cornwall and Devon populations have established that both male and female Semitic and Mediterranean haplotypes are present in the contemporary population in relatively high frequencies compared to England as a whole, as high as 6% for the characteristic North African male lineage known as E3b. Evidently a colony of Phoenicians, so-called, right? Danites, Carthaginians. Again, who's these Carthaginians that had a secret connect to Atlantis? Remember, the Carthaginians kept a secret for years that they were going to Atlantis back and forth. Who are the Carthaginians? And the like not only settled there in ancient times, but also left descendants who still dwell in the region. Topographic names speak for Middle Eastern influences. The main river is Tamar, Hebrew and Arabic for date palm. All right, Tamar, Hebrew, Tamar. Who's Tamar? Remember the story in my Israel and the Nations of Europe playlist and series, right? Queen Tefi, Tamar, Scotia, right? We're talking about Jeremiah and the daughters of Zedekiah. You guys know. Its Latin form is Phoenix, reflected in the name of the Phoenician, who used the date palm as an emblem of state on their currency. The Phoenix palm tree, which we have over here in abundance in the Americas. Enoch. There are towns named Maracion, Cairo, and Menheniot. In fact, an ancient tradition derives the name Britannia, originally called Britannica by the Greeks, from the Phoenician word Bratanak, listen, or Baratnak, country of tin. And you also got people of the covenant, right? Barat, the covenant in Hebrew, Barat, people of a covenant. By the 1200 CE, Carthage and Phoenicia had long since departed from the world stage, but the association of Middle Eastern people with Cornish tin mining was still strong. In 1290, Edward I decreed that all Jews in England must either exit the country or, and this is the portion of the royal decree glossed over by many historians, accept conversion to Christianity. So if they didn't leave, they had to convert, right? So when they converted, you lost them in history. Now they're just Christians. So as the authors and others have argued, this was quite likely the origin of an exodus of Jews to Scotland, and an organized crypto-Jewish presence in England, especially in Cornwall and Devon. According to traditional accounts, the next known openly Jewish figure to set foot in the district was a certain Joachim Gans, invited by the Company for the Mines Royal to advise them on copper extraction. He went first to Keswick to inspect copper mines and produce a report on the treatment of copper ores. Next, he spent 3 years in Cornwall from 1586 to 1589 until he was expelled for drawing too much unfavorable attention to his religious beliefs. This description of Gans appears to be not only anti-Semitic but also less than candid, for he continued to be retained by various British government representatives until 1608. He is, in fact, the very same Jewish metallurgist who made multiple trips to North America in the employ of Sir Walter Raleigh, and later the Virginia Company. He was present and active both in the Roanoke and Jamestown colonies. So you guys know the background between the Roanoke and Jamestown colonies, who was really going there, who was settling. They weren't so English. A lot of these were crypto-Jews. Remember my videos on that, guys. So the question arises from Gans was working with Devon and Cornwall, and why? The short answer is the West Country Gentlemen, as they were called at the Elizabethan court, a remarkable group of landowners and privateers from Cornwall and Devon who changed the course of English, American, and world history. That they were of crypto-Jewish origin no one has suggested or suspected among modern-day historians. However, strong circumstantial evidence favors this inference, all right? So he's going to go down a list of people, again, that are, he's saying, hey, these are possible crypto-Jews that people thought were just so-called English. So he's going to begin with Sir Walter Raleigh. Now, before we, go with Walter Raleigh, let's learn about him a little bit.
Who is Walter Raleigh, supposedly? Also spelled Raleigh. Right? Raleigh. Why is that important? Remember Raleigh. Raleigh was an English statesman, soldier, spy, writer, poet, explorer, and landed gentleman. Raleigh was born to a Protestant family. Who's the Protestants? Little is known of his early life. Oh, they don't know his early life, right? Yeah, they don't want to tell you. Though in his late teens, he spent some time in France. Oh, France, who were you there? With the Huguenots, taking part in the religious civil wars. Who was under religious civil wars? Let me show you. The French Wars of Religion were a prolonged period of war, popular unrest between Catholics and who? Huguenots. He was helping in the religious civil wars of France, helping who? The Huguenots. His family, his Moorish family, Sephardic Moorish family. And it says Walter Raleigh, from 1552 to 1680. Walter Raleigh's earliest known ancestors is believed to be Simon, Hebrew name, Simone, a Hebrew name. De Raleigh, also a town in Devonshire, De Raleigh. He was born in 1195 in Devon and was reportedly a merchant. So they're talking about his ancestor, a merchant. Who's the merchants? Remember, man, Nations of the World series. Who's the merchants? We broke that down. Even from ancient times, who was the merchant? Silk routes and all that. Trading in ancient times, who's the real merchant? When we talk about merchants in your genealogy, in the 1800s, he was a merchant named Benjamin Williams. His son named Isaac. And then his son is Jacob. But you see the trend. I hope you guys have seen the trend too when you're doing your genealogy. So what are these people really? Are they just white people? You think they were just white people that you had in your genealogy, huh? Gosh, the hijack big time. Not on your fault, not our fault. But now that we know or have a better clue, we need to really relook at things. We need to include all our lines. Evidently, like many other families, the Raleighs were Anglo-Norman, right? Normans. Who's the Normans? We broke this down in part one, I think. That forebears came over from France with William the Conqueror. In recent generations, they married Champernounds from Champernon in Normandy. Gregson, the daughter of the Genoese Italy merchant family whose name is unknown. Sir Walter's mother was by descent a Champernoun, and Carew, Cornish. That's the hijack with the images here, because according to this person, Sephardic people were white, By an early marriage, She bore, well, these are the actual only paintings of these people that you find, you know, these whitewash paintings. So, but when they're writing, they know who they're writing about. We're going to show you. It says, by an earlier marriage, she bore 3 sons, John Humphrey and Adrian Gilbert. Raleigh's brother-in-law and cousin was Sir Richard Greenville, a cousin also to Drake. All right. His cousin is Francis Drake. They're actually cousins. They're family. These families were not only heavily intermarried, generation to generation, but also multiplying implicated in settling colonial America. The Champernounds, Raleighs, Gilberts, Drakes, Carews were ardent Protestants. All right, Protestants, Drakes, Raleighs, Gilberts, Carews, Protestants by the late 1500s. But before that, they were, we suggest, in varying degrees, crypto-Jews. Again, crypto-Jews in various degrees. Who? Raleigh and Francis Drake. They were people of Jewish heritage, mutually recognized, who had begun to dissemble their roots and religion since the forced conversion of English Jews under Edward I in 1290, all the way back in those times. Sephardic Moorish people were being persecuted. Right? That's when it all started in England. As can be seen in portraits, the Raleigh, Drakes, and Gilberts were uniformly dark. They were what? Dark, with prominent noses. So why are you showing us a white guy here? You see what I was saying? They know what these people look like, but again, we're going to get a true depiction of Sir Francis Drake. Shout out to Troy Johnson. You keep seeing whitewashed images. That puts a whole spell on you straight up. You know, again, we got to break the spell because they're telling us that the Drakes, the Raleighs were uniformly dark with prominent noses. Uniformly dark with prominent noses. Shout out to Troy again, man. You guys don't know, Troy's gonna change history. Troy's paintings is gonna be all over soon, the world. Shout out to Troy Johnson, man. Now it says here, prominent noses, high foreheads, and narrow faces, not unlike Iberian and Moroccan Jews. Just like them. Not unlike them, but just like them. And aside on Genoese Jews, a Jewish mercantile family from Genoa, who had connections both in the Low Countries and royal court in England under the Tudor monarchs, were the Anthonys or Antons. The earliest of these was a goldsmith and wind instrument player brought to London by Henry VIII. John Anthony, also known as Antonius Moises. He was one of the 20 Jews who were court musicians. A descendant, Mark Antony, was sent to school in Italy by his father, but ran away, was captured by Algerian pirates, and sold into slavery in Algiers. Who? We're talking about people of color. More and more war. The captain of British ships took pity on him, carried him to America, and resolved him to pay for his passage in 1698. How did he pay for his passage? Through an indenture, most likely. A farmer in New Kent County, Virginia, bought him for 3 years. There you go. Bought him for 3 years. No, he bound him for 3 years. The young man, so he wasn't a slave for life, right? Only 3 years. The young man ended up establishing a trading post, marrying Isabella Hart of a leading Jewish trader family in Virginia, while his son Joseph married Elizabeth Clark of another Jewish mercantile company. A granddaughter, Sarah Clark Anthony, married a Thomas Cooper, grandson of a crypto-Jewish London merchant. Crypto-Jewish merchant Cooper, a crypto-Jewish merchant, and son of an Indian trader. Boom. There you go. And what does their kids become? So-called Negro, so-called Black, so-called African American. The son of a crypto-Jewish merchant and an Indian trader. You guys understand? How many genealogies you got? Do we got to go back to the chart, the genealogical chart I showed the other day? How many grandmas you got by your 10th generation? How many grandfathers you got by your 11th generation? By your 8th generation? How many grandparents are you leaving out? How much history and culture? How much important? How many ancestors you're not honoring? 2 major genealogies here. Think about that. So Cooper was a founding figure in American Freemasonry.
That's in chapter 10. We're eventually going to get into that. Don't worry, we're going to try to get through this whole book. These Coopers are ancestors of both authors. So that's why they did this book. In the 1570s, Walter Raleigh was sent to Munster province in Ireland, where Queen Elizabeth was striving to put down revolts by the Catholic Irish. Queen Elizabeth, again, who was she in alliance with? The Sultan of Morocco, right? The Anglo-Moroccan alliance. And she was having problems with the Catholics. So you see, again, she's Protestant. They have a similar culture or background. The Sultan of Morocco and Queen Elizabeth. Where here Walter and his cousins, the Gilberts, Greenvilles, St. Legers, and Sushis, took part in military operations near Cork. Elizabeth was impressed with not only Raleigh's political acumen, but also his dark good looks. His dark good look. That's what Elizabeth liked. All right? His dark look. His, oh man, that's so funny. His dark good looks. Oh man. Yeah, they want to show us a whitewash painting, right? And every time they show us these whitewash paintings, these people are not just white; they're just like really pale. They look like they're really like a walking corpse, Caspers. But what attracted Elizabeth to Raleigh, not that he was helping her and because he wanted to help her with his Protestant cause, it was mainly because of his dark good looks. Straight up, that's simple. His dark good looks, it says. She awarded him the royal license as exporter of woolen broadcloth, a lucrative sinecure. He was also appointed warden of the stannaries, director of the Cornish tin mines, and later in life he was alternately in and out of royal favor. Unpopular for his religious skepticism, at the same time that he was celebrated as an advocate of religious tolerance. These ambiguities are consistent with crypto-Jewish background. It don't make sense why he would be doing all this stuff. Is what I was trying to explain to you. It don't make sense when they're teaching us history. But when we understand that he's a crypto-Jew, that's his background, then it all makes sense. Spanish Jews were naturally tolerant of others' religious practices. The famous tenet of convivencia, meaning like living together in harmony, convivencia, having been one of the pillars of civil society that prevailed for so long under the Arabs. In many cases, Spanish Jews were also adherents of Averroism. This was an Arab school of philosophy that extended far beyond its founders, Averroes. Arguments about the oneness of reality. Jewish Averroes were attracted by the potential they saw in the school of thought for resolving the conflicts between philosophy and religion. They tended to believe that both philosophy and religion were equally valid metaphysical constructs, even when they appeared to produce different answers to the same question. It goes without saying that this way of thinking was fraught with the perils of rationalization and solipsism. Yet a certain vein of intellectual laziness and cynicism suited perfectly the style of living of many crypto-Jews, according to their chief chronicler David Gitlitz in The Religion of the Crypto-Jews. By 1548, Raleigh was exploring the North American coastlines with his half-brother, Sir Humphrey Gilbert. Their goal, the establishment of British colonies and parlous territories. Colonizing the New World with England subjects was a core aspect of Elizabeth's political strategy to challenge Spanish hegemony. You see why they were sending so many people as undesirables, kidnapping these kids, remember, spiriting away, forcing the colonization to beat Spain or the Catholics, to beat the Catholics from colonizing. The cast of characters involved in these often surreptitious efforts included not only Raleigh, Gilbert, Drake, and their several cousins, all their family, their several cousins, they're all related, there's several cousins, Sephardic, Moorish, crypto, Morisco, Jews, but also other persons we believe to be of Sephardic, Jewish, or Morisco extraction. Among these are the two Richard
Hagliots, a probable Moroccan name. Hagliok, Moroccan name. The Hagliok Society collection of books. They got one of the biggest collection of the voyages, these ancient colonial voyages. Well, not ancient, but the colonial medieval voyaging books. Any writings, they bought them. They have a big collection, the Hagliots. Now we know why. That was their family. Uncle and nephew hired as the West Country Gentleman's London publicist, cartographer, and mathematician John D. Turkish Day, court member Day or D. Day, astronomers Thomas Harriot and Stephen Parmenius, Italian surname, ship captains Arthur Fossi, Moroccan name, Simon Ferdinando, Sephardic surname, Thomas Cavendish, Devonshire surname, and probably from the Mediterranean before that. Philip Amadas, Sephardic surname. Pedro Diaz, Sephardic. All right, now I want you to pay attention. There's numbers, there's a lot of sources and footnotes. So they're not just saying perhaps, they want you to go look at the footnote to verify why they're saying that. Right? So again, Pedro Diaz, Sephardic. Arthur Barlow, son of Low or Levi, Lowy, Low or Levi. And metallurgist Joachim Gans or Joachim Gans, who, as previously mentioned, was an Ashkenazi Jew. All right, we got one Ashkenazi Jew. Hardly one of the West Country gentlemen's associates was not a surname that can be documented in the records of the Spanish Inquisition, as compiled by Pere Bonin in Sangre Judía, or Jewish blood. Almost all can be found in Ilhermi, Feigenbaum's, and collaborators' dictionary of Sephardic surnames. All right, look at all these books up if you guys are interested in pursuing the subject. Second edition, 2004. The names in this essential handbook are cross-referenced to local Sephardic Jewish genealogies for Amsterdam, London, Tunisia, Brazil, and other diaspora communities. Diaspora, yes, diaspora. Again, a real middle passage. Not talking about Kunta Kinte fairy tales here. Raleigh's accomplishments won him a knighthood and governorship of Virginia. All right, his knighthood and Virginia, that was his cousin. And well, he was attracted to his cousin, right, because of his dark good looks. So might as well make him a knight and give him governorship of Virginia, keep him in the family. Plus, he's like, I like him. The company's first efforts at colonization in Roanoke, 1586 and 1591, ended in failure. But as we argue in chapter 3, all right, so this is the famous lost colony of Roanoke. Remember, who were these people? Yo, they're telling you big things here. Major drop. These are Sephardic Moorish people. We thought these were all English and white Christians. Again, they lied to us. Break the spells. Break the spells. Okay? Wow. Roanoke, lost colony. But as we argue in chapter 3, there is evidence from the passenger list, foodstuff, and occupations of the colonists that they might have been Sephardic refugees. Names such as Ananias, Dare, Jewish first name and likely Jewish last name through a Norman family, and Dionys, Harvey, Greek first name, Breton, and Norman surname formed apparently from Hebrew har, mount, are clearly not English, nor are accountants and university professors among those normally enlisted to sail off and subdue the wilderness. All right. Arguably, these particular draftees consented to participate in the Roanoke settlement of 1587 because they feared the upcoming Spanish invasion of England in 1588 and trusted the Jewish and Morisco organizers. Again, who do they trust? Listen to this. You got to understand, we got this already in a lot of past videos. Who was really funding the ships and the colonization? Who funded Columbus? Who was funding all this stuff? Who was really organizing all this stuff? Who was the port Jews? They trusted the Jewish and Morisco organizers of the settlement to protect them. All right? One of the financial underwriters of the project was Raleigh's father-in-law, William Sanderson, a wealthy London merchant. Merchant. Those are the clues. Merchant. Although Raleigh's Roanoke colony was never rescued, he did not abandon his efforts to colonize America. In 1595, he launched a new effort, this time directly challenging Spanish power in Central America, by planting a British colony in Guyana on the Spanish Main. Who? Raleigh, right? William Sanderson provided the funding, and Oxford mathematics and navigation professor Lawrence Keymis from Hebrew Chemai or chemist, and Sir Robert Cross were also involved in it. All right, Guyana, huh? This is another article right here. We read this in one of my book series, Nations of the World. The Jewish settlement in Pomeroon, Raleigh, Guyana. The Jewish. Oh, yeah, it wasn't English. It actually wasn't English. Actually, crypto-Jews, crypto-Muslims. They had to go there because they got kicked out of Brazil because the Catholics were back in town. And you know what happened? They eventually had to leave Guyana too because of the same reason. And then they ended up in Curacao, Jamaica, Bahamas, Barbados. But we move on to, again, Sir Francis Drake. Before we look at the whitewashed picture, before we look at the whitewashed picture, I'm going to help you break the spell. Troy Johnson is going to help us break the spell. We're at Francis Drake now. So Drake was born in Devon around 1540 and was a kinsman of the Hawkins family. Right? He was what? Related to who? The Hawkins family, which included John Hawkins. Remember, the first so-called English slaver? But turns out Hawkins wasn't really English. One of the great English sailors of the period, biographer Peter Whitfield comments that in Drake's resentment of Spain became a passion. Why did he resent Spain so much, Drake? Why did he hate Spain so much? Again, remember, these are Catholics he hates. They're persecuting and killing his people, making them convert, making them leave their ancestral lands or wherever they've been for a long time, hundreds of years. And they're making them take this religion that is not theirs. So why would Drake have such resentment against Spain? He learned sailing, as did most of his compatriots, from Sephardic and Morisco navigators like Martin Cortez and Pedro de Medina. So who was teaching everybody how to navigate? Who was in the ships? Who was building them? Who were the captains? Who were the navigators, the map makers, cartographers? Yes, Sephardic and Moriscos, Muslims. In 1595, John Davis translated Medina's navigational writings into the Seaman's Secrets. The Cornish ports of Bristol and Plymouth, but both known to have crypto-Jewish communities. Bristol, remember, the black population of Bristol in the 18th century. The black population. Turns out Bristol and Liverpool had a very large swarthy population, so-called black population. Bristol, right, which happens to have large crypto-Jewish communities, became breeding grounds for a generation of privateers, so breeding grounds for pirates, eager to go damage Spain's interests in the Americas. All right, why they want to go straight up to Spain? It's more than just Spain against England. We're talking about people getting revenge. We're talking about people being kicked out of their homes, being persecuted, being killed, being forcibly converted, shamed, thrown out, disfranchised. So we're talking about people wanting to get revenge. So they were meeting up, setting up shop in these port towns of Bristol and Plymouth, England, which happened to be a major so-called slave port for the Americas. They sent a lot of people from Bristol, again, to the plantations in the Caribbean and North America. So it's very important what I want to explain, so you guys can understand. So when we talk about Pirates of the Caribbean, when we see in these movies, right? Let's go back. All right, this is from another video. Jewish Pirates of the Caribbean, how a generation of swashbuckling Jews carved out an empire in the New World in their quest for treasure, religious freedom, and what? Revenge. 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 It all goes to complete circle. If you guys understand, you see the bigger picture now. Jewish pirates. Who's these so-called Jews? So again, these pirates, so-called pirates, privateers, being contracted by English people who were really crypto-Jewish people, contracting their own people, paying them, financing them to go raid Catholics, not Spain, but Catholics, right? These Catholics may have their family on board, enslaved. Think about that. Drake was perhaps foremost among them. He spent his early years engaged in contraband trade, skirmishing with the Spanish in the Canaries and the Azores, both of which harbored large crypto-Jewish communities. The Canary Islands and the Azores, all right? Drake captained a ship owned by his kinsman Hawkins named the Judith, heroine from Hebrew legend. Within a few years, he had fervently committed himself to destroying Spanish holdings in the Americas. As his biographer points out, Spain and all things Spanish became his prey. He would dedicate himself to attacking and plundering Spanish possessions. All right? They dedicated themselves to doing this. You understand why now, right? In May 1572, Drake set sail from Plymouth in a ship named the Swan and the Pasha, English royal emblem and Ottoman title. On Ottoman title, arriving in Panama, he formed an alliance with a group of what? French Huguenots. Who? Francis Drake. Again, who's the Huguenots? Huguenot? Moors. With Moors. Let's just rewrite this. Who? Drake, a Sephardic Jew, did an alliance with Moors in Panama. Moors who happened to be privateers slash pirates. Pirate Moors in Panama. Drake, a pirate from so-called England, who's Sephardic Jewish, person of color, made an alliance with his cousins, the so-called Huguenots, who are Moors, so-called black people, in Panama. Get it? These, we can surmise, included many crypto-Jews. If a study of the antecedents of Huguenots among refugees of the Spanish Inquisition can be believed, all right? We already knew the Huguenots were cryptos, but then these we can surmise. Yeah, you definitely can surmise. You're right. Many of them were crypto Jews, these Huguenots. They succeeded in capturing a Spanish treasure caravan, totaling 300 tons of silver. Drake returned to England, not only a stupendously wealthy man, all right, but also a national hero, catapulted to the highest fame. You got the Catholics for us. Among Drake's other exploits was the first English circumnavigation of the world, sailing in the Golden Hind. Kabbalistic title. So Drake, yeah, he went around the world. He actually landed in Costa Rica. It's called Drake's Bay today. It's on the Pacific side of Costa Rica, and is believed to be one, if not the place, of where he possibly buried his lost treasure. Yes, they still haven't found it. Following Sephardic Morisco maps drawn by Mercator, Abraham Ortelius, all right, these map makers, Mercator, Abraham Ortelius, Otello, the Italian, all right, these were all what? Sephardic Moriscos Moors. And Fernão Vaz Durado, perhaps his most revealing initiative with regard to our thesis, was leading the Great West Indian Raid in 1585, which took a fleet of over 20 ships and 1,000 soldiers on a destructive blitz through a Spanish Caribbean, including the ports of Santo Domingo and Hispaniola and St. Augustine in Florida. All right? So the Sephardic Morisco pirates came to crash the party from the Catholic. Again, we're not talking about white versus black. More and more war. The tour ended with a stop to bring relief to his kinsman Raleigh's floundering Roanoke colony of the Virginia coast. In each foray into Spanish territory, Drake made a special effort to sack and ruin Catholic churches. Why did he make a special effort to ruin their Catholic churches? Why did he specifically, personally, want to sack and ruin Catholic churches? Because he's a Sephardic Moor. He's like, yo, you kicked us out, man. We hate you, man. You trying to make us convert? Oh, we're gonna ruin all your churches. We're not just gonna take over your colony. We're gonna destroy your churches too, your Catholic churches, just because. Because I have a grudge, a personal vendetta against you guys. His final stroke against the Spanish came in 1588 when, on the aptly named Revenge, he led the British victory in the fight against the Armada. We propose that not only was Drake aware that he had Sephardic Jewish antecedents, but the Spanish were as well. His surname Drake is Spanish for dragon. Drake is Spanish for dragon, dragon. DNA samples from Drake's brother descendants, Francis, had no children, show their Y chromosome to be type R1A1, a common Ashkenazi Levite lineage. Is it really Ashkenazi when it's talking about Leviticus, Levite people? All right, you guys enjoying this? Should we continue? I think we're gonna continue. We're gonna get to John Hawkins, the famous John Hawkins. Famous John Hawkins. Supposed to be the first slaver, right? Are we talking about a person of color here? I think so. So dodge the hijack with whitewashing. John Hawkins, 1532 to 1595, was a kinsman of Drake, and his life serves as a critical piece of evidence for our Sephardic Morisco thesis. I break the spell. Hawkins was never an English white Christian. Break the spell. We're talking about slave masters, slavers, and all these people invading, right? These foreigners coming with their... No, you got the whole picture wrong. And I know it's not your fault. That's what they told us growing up. We assumed, we believed these were all white people. We believed that anybody who was a slaver or owned slave was so-called white. We believed. We got to get past believing. We got to start knowing. We know now. Because his life serves as a critical piece of evidence for our Sephardic, Moorish, Morisco Moor thesis. His father William was the leading merchant in Plymouth. The leading merchant in Plymouth. Plymouth was one of those ports, right, where they were enslaving people and bringing them to America. He was the merchant there, making sure they were being sent, making all the money of people. Sephardic Moriscos during the 1530s and traded in the Caribbean and with Portuguese held Guyana. The ports of Plymouth and Bristol, from which he sailed, were notable locations for what have been termed port Jews. Port Jews, again, Plymouth and Bristol. I had a feeling this was a port Jew. You know what's funny though? If you go read into Bristol slavery, you're gonna see that Bristol was a big slave port. So it's really a port, a Jewish port, so-called Sephardic Morisco port. Merchant. They were dealing people, trade, commerce, commodities, everything. From Plymouth and Bristol, men sailed in the company of Magellan and Sebastian Caboto. Among these ambiguous figures was Captain Roger Barlow, who later accompanied Drake to North America. The Hawkins family history in Cornwall can be traced to the late 1400s, when John Hawkins, and it has a footnote 50, of Powitstock House, married John Amidas, compare Amadas, Spanish, above, of Lucenton. All these names appear to be Sephardic Jewish. John and Joanne Hawkins had a son, William, who by 1524 was treasurer for the Corporation of Plymouth and tax collector for Devon County. Who was handling the money? The money, the way the measurement of gold, money. Who's handling the money? The money. Sephardic Morisco people. It's always been That's, you know, who established Wachovia Bank? Let them know, Mac. Moravians. William married John Trelawney. Trelawney, Cornish surname. Father and son, William in 1519 and John in 1532. A later Richard Hawkins from this same line, born 1560, would marry Judith Heal of Bristol family, which immigrated to Virginia in 1620, and which is related to one of the authors, Hirschman. The Healy family name underwent permutation to Hale. In the colonies, they are listed as free persons. Oh, big one right there, right? Listed as free persons. But why would white people be listed as free persons? Wouldn't they be white? I mean, free anyways? Like, why do you have to list them as free persons? They're letting you know a big drop here. What are they being listed as? Let me show you. We're not talking about white people. They were listed as what? Free persons of color in Tennessee during the late 1700s and are considered Melungeon. Oh, the Melungeons. Again, that was a big drop. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. To me, that's major. All right. Because there's actual evidence of these people being listed as people of color in the 1700s. And they were actually considered what? Melungeon? We know Melungeon tri-racial people a lot of the time, including Indian, Europeans, so-called runaways, right? But who are these runaways really? Are they really Africans? So what's really the makeup of Melungeon? Members of a lower Appalachian ethnic isolate believed to derive from Portuguese Jews and fellow travelers like Moriscos and Scotsmen. Scotsmen, the Black Scots. So Portuguese Jews, we know they were very swarthy. We got the accounts of that. Hawkins' biographer James Alexander Williamson states the custom ledgers of Henry VIII show William Hawkins exporting cloth and tin to the ports of Western Europe and importing a variety of goods. Salt of Rochelle, wines of Bordeaux, Portugal, and Spain, sugar and pepper probably from Portugal, olive oil, and soap from Spain. It is very probable that some of the sugar and wines were bought from the Canaries. In all these ports, Jews, crypto-Jews, Moors, and crypto-Muslims were often in control of maritime trade, right? We're talking about real history here. Damn, break the spell. Don't forget this info. Don't let it just go one ear and leave the other. Like, hold on to this. See how it relates to you. Hawkins also traded with Portuguese Brazil under the invading Dutch, the first land in the West that opened up for freestanding Sephardic settlements. Again, Brazil. Brazil. He dealt with other immersions such as Robert Reniger, Thomas Bory, and John Phillips. The pattern of trading and origin of these surnames are indicative of Sephardic Jewish ethnicity. By 1548, the Hawkins family and its associates were trading in Morocco, a haven for both Sephardim and Moriscos. A haven. Morocco. A haven for who? Sephardic Jews and Moriscos. A haven. The French ports with which the family traded, the Epi, Rouen, and La Rochelle, were also heavily populated by Protestant Huguenots, again, popping out of everywhere. Again, it's all the same people. It's all family. They were trading with Protestant Huguenots again. Many of those whose origins were Sephardic and Morisco. Who? The Huguenots were what? Moors and Sephardic Jewish, Moorish Jews. The French Protestants by 1560 had undertaken attacks on Spanish interests in Cartagena. Again, they're just in Colombia and all these places. Havana, that's Cuba, Santiago, Chile, Santa Marta, I'm not sure where, but they're not just attacking Spain, the country, because a lot of them are Spanish. Remember, they're Sephardic Jewish and Moriscos. They're coming from Spain themselves. They're attacking Catholics. One may speculate that when Rouen, a center of English Jewry, exempt from many of the regulations concerning Jews since the time of William the Conqueror, or before passed to the French quarter, French under Queen Mary in 1553. Many Rouen Jews threw in their lot with the Huguenots. All right, many what? they threw in their what? With the Huguenots to escape the growing anti-Jewish climate. So again, you see how all these people have a similar story, being persecuted the same way, all the same people. That's the hijack with the tags. Rouen and Lajarre became popular stopping off points for Spanish Jews in exile. At any rate, it was the Sephardic and Morisco population of Spain fleeing after 1492 to France, the Dutch Republic, and England. All right, all these places. Dutch, remember, especially New Jerusalem, was the Dutch, who's the Black Dutch, who's the real Dutch traders that was most committed psychologically and militarily to her destruction of a world power. Protestant regimes in France, Holland, and Britain. Protestants, again, Protestants. Full circle. You see this? Who? In France, Holland, and Britain. This is why they were fighting with Spain, so supposedly Spain, right? Catholics, or the Roman Catholic Empire. Undoubtedly were aware that several of their most fervently anti-Spanish and pro-Protestant sailors and soldiers were Sephardic Jews and Moriscos, who many what pro-Protestants were what Moors, Protestants Moors, Sephardic Jews, Protestants Moors. Right? Repetition is good. Beneath Christian camouflage, Moors beneath Christian camouflage, using Protestant outwardly. Remember? But they also were politic enough to let this go in order to obtain their talents and passion as anti-Catholic warriors. During the 1560s, John Hawkins established himself as a trader, merchant in the Canary Islands. Merchant Hawkins, here one of his foremost friends and partners was the Genoese descended merchant, Pedro de Ponte, another merchant. The Ponto family was and is a prominent one in the Canaries. It is self-avowedly of Sephardic extraction. Right? It goes full circle again. In 1559, Hawkins married Catherine Gonson, the daughter of Benjamin Gonson, Scottish Norwegian surname. Treasurer of the Navy, the marriage led to his connection to a set of powerful men dominating Britain's naval operations: William Winter, Lionel Duckett, and Sir Thomas Lodge. Hawkins' partner included Juan Martinez of Cadiz, Spain, and Lorenzo Barnaldi Day of Santo Domingo, a lawyer and a converted Jew. One of the captains sailing off on Hawkins' trading and raiding expeditions, another kinsman, John Lovell, also carries a Sephardic surname. Lovell. Others include Guillermo de Oclando, Valentin Verde Green, and Robert Barrett, who reportedly spoke Spanish. Right? So Valentin Verde, right? Verde is green. Barrett was captured. Verde in Spanish, right? Is green or verde. Barrett was captured by the Spanish and burned alive by the Inquisition in Seville in 1570. You see why Drake and these people hate the Spanish? They have so much resentment against the Spanish or the Catholics because they were doing that. They were burning Sephardic Moors at the stake alive. They were doing that. That was the Inquisition. You understand why they were raiding? That's why they became pirates. What led to the whole pirate thing of the Caribbean movie. All right? They were burning them alive. Others of Hawkins' men seized by the Spanish and tortured by the Inquisitional proceedings were William Collins, Paul de Leon from Leon, William Griffin, George Rively, John Moon or Luna, right? Luna in Spanish, John Lee, William Brown, Thomas Goodall, John Gilbert, Roger R. Marr, John Gray, John Martin, George D. or Day, Diaz, and Miles Greek Milo. Phillips, native to the Netherlands, France, Ireland, and England. Many of these were not English or Irish or French, but to judge from their surnames, they were what? Sephardic or Moorish ancestry. Okay? In 1569, the Huguenots and English merchants. So again, comrades, right? Confederation coming together. Merchants and Huguenots, all the same people, in the port of Plymouth were working in concert to assail Spanish shipping or Catholics shipping in the imperial treasure fleet. The French Cardinal Chatillon, a Huguenot, likely Sephardic, a Huguenot who's likely Sephardic despite his Catholic office, the name perhaps originally Castillon, from Chatillon, when actually it went from Castillon to Chatillon, was in London on a campaign urging an attack on all the enemies of God, otherwise called Papists. Drake's kinmen, the Capernauns, were deeply involved in this effort and was a Cornish man named Philip Wadukushai. We're going to go into Martin Frobisher. Who is Martin Frobisher? Frobisher was a privateer / pirate, right, with roots not in Cornwall or Devon but Yorkshire. According to the biographer James McDermott, the family had crossed the border from Scotland and bore originally the name Frobisher, a variant of Forbes. Related like Phillips to the Jewish names Phoebus, Farabi, and Farabi. Martin Frobisher's mother, Margaret York, was closely related to Sir John York of London, the notable merchant tailor, merchant, financier, and Iberian trader. John York traded in Antwerp and Calais, acted as a master of the London Tower Mint in 1544, raised foreign funds for Henry VIII, and helped found the Suffolk Mint, all typical occupations for conversos, meaning that was the jobs or professions of Moorish Sephardic Jews. By 1547, he was Sheriff of London. He acted, so listen, a converso, person of color, right? 1547, England, all right? A sheriff, we're going to say, straight up say it, all right? We're going to use the tags right now. A black person was Sheriff of London in 1547. This is what I want you to understand when we're reading things like this. When we say converso, that's a tag. He acted as one of the king's principal financial agents in the Netherlands. And most lucratively, he received unprecedented terms to supply the Tower Mint with silver bullion from Flanders. From this description and his activities and titles, John York would also appear to be of Sephardic descent. It was into his uncle John York's home and business that young Martin Frobisher was sent to learn a trade by his mother. Frobisher was posted abroad on trading trips to the Barbary Coast and the Portuguese African slave colony of Guinea by a syndicate of London merchants that included, beside his uncle, Thomas Locke, Edward Castilian, Sir George Barney, Anthony Hickman, and Nicholas Lambert. The Lockes are described as fervent Protestants. One of them, John Locke, having made a personal pilgrimage to Jerusalem in 1553. The name appears to come either from Hebrew loak, number, table, tariff, or calendar, or the Spanish place named Logo. Famous bearers of the Louk surname lived in Morocco, Tangiers, and Spain, as well as modern-day Israel. The Lockes, George Barney, William Towey's son, John Cartelet, and Stephen Baruch is Baruch, Hebrew for blessed, were principals in the Muscovy Company, an English-Russian trading venture established in the 1550s. The company's directors were the Earl of Leicester, William Cecil, 1st Baron of Burghley, and Sir Francis Walsingham. Look at that, Walsingham, principal advisor to Elizabeth, a man who was in the eyes of his contemporaries the most ardent anti-Catholic in England. Another Locke family member, Michael was a brilliant cartographer and astronomer who spoke Spanish, French, Italian, Latin, and Arabic, and who had traveled to France, Spain, Portugal, Venice, Greece, and the Levant. Michael ended his career in Aleppo, Turkey, serving there as a consul of the English Levant Company. Frobisher accompanied both Drake and Raleigh on their Spanish raids, all right, and assisted with the initial push to establish the Roanoke colony. Dying without issue, he left his estate to nieces and nephews. His will was witnessed by Thomas Coldwell, Anthony Lewis, civic name for sacred name for Levi, Timothy Perrott, Richard Ferrer, Spanish for blacksmith or a common Jewish trade. His wife Dorothy shortly thereafter married Sir John Saville, Jewish form of Samuel, Baron of the Exchequer, often an office held by Jews. Right, so major drive there on this person and his family. Also had some relations there with the what I would assume is the Dutch West Indian or East Indian Company or the Royal African Society. And this is all, shout out to Against with Topcast. So this makes sense, when we're talking about people creating this Royal African Society and finding out these were people of color. Well, we know kind of like who they may have been now. So we're going to Robin Sidney Sidoney, Earl of Leicester. The list of family names of likely Sephardic or crypto-Jewish ancestry in Elizabethan England would not be complete without two much more prominent players in the trade and diplomacy of the day. The first is the Sidneys, also spelled Sidoney, and Sidon Palestine. One of the leading figures in this line was Robin Sidney, Earl of Leicester, 1563 to 1626. Robin is a form of Reuben, right? The tribe of Reuben. So Jewish, right? Hebrew. Robin is Reuben. Robinson, the son of Robin. Robin is Reuben. All right? A name favored by crypto-Jews. Robert Sidney's father, Henry, was a radical Protestant, right? Quotation marks, according to biographer Hay. In 1579, Robert was placed under the tutelage of Hubert Languet, a scholarly Huguenot emigrant. On a tour through the Low Countries, France and Germany, Languet introduced him to the eminent champions of Protestantism in the late 1500s, including the Prince of Orange, right? The Prince of Orange. Francois de Lannoy, Robert's older brother, Philip, also ardently Protestant, was tutored by Mr. Saville, medieval Hebrew Saville. He numbered among his friends and associates such men as John Norreus, Nor, Arabic for light, Walter Raleigh, and Joaquim Camerasi. In the 1570s, Philip Sidney attempted to form a unified European Protestant coalition against the Catholic Church in Spain. All right? So you see, that's what really was going on. A European Protestant coalition, a confederation, people coming together against who? Catholic Church in Spain. Kind of like the same. In the early 1580s, he argued for an assault on Spain itself. He is best remembered for his defense of Poesy, a seminal treatise on literature from the Renaissance period. One of his best friends was the cult humanist Giordano Bruni. Oh man, Giordano Bruni, the alchemist, Hermetic. We got him in my thought videos, who helped introduce the Kabbalah and Egyptian magic in his native Italy. So the Kabbalah is Egyptian magic, huh? Sidney's last work, left incomplete at his death, was a verse translation of the Psalms. Robert married Barbara, the daughter of wealthy John Gamache. In 1584, by 1589, he married her in 1584. By 1589, he had been named governor of Flushing in the British-held province of Zeeland in the Netherlands, where he instituted free trade channels with England and required his soldiers to follow strict Calvinist religious practices. Again, remember, Protestantism, Calvinist, Huguenot, it's all Sephardic, crypto-Jewish, Moorish people. He became allied personally and politically with the House of Orange, especially with Louis de Coligny's son, Count Maurice, medieval Hebrew form of Moses. The Sidney family was also intimately involved in the New World colonization from the 1580s. The Virginia Company, one of their many investments, again, the Virginia Company, who invested? Sephardic Moorish people in the Virginia Company, right? One of their many investments is described as embodying the radical Protestant element, interest in the New World, radical Protestant element, all right? Quotations. All of the company of Sir Thomas Gates, the first governor of Virginia, had served under Prince Maurice of Nassau, all right? Major drop there too. We get into Robert Devereux. Devereux. That's the hijack with the whitewashing. Remember, the Devereux family came to England with the Norman conquest. They take their name from Evreux, a town in Lower Normandy near Rouen. By the 1570s, they were allied with the dyed-in-the-wool Protestants and Elizabethan England, marrying into the Knowley, Rod, and Sidney Sidoney families. Note the use of Robin for Robert. In 1573, Walter Devereux, now Earl of Essex, was dispatched to Ireland to colonize Ulster for England. His wife Lettice, or Letizia, a Roman Jewish name, was described as dark and beautiful. Again, Lettice, Roman Jewish, Edomite Jewish. Is that what you're saying? Roman? Who's a Roman? The Edomite, Hebrew Jewish. That's why it's Jewish. Edomite, Roman, was described as dark. The Edomites were dark complexion. Romans are dark, right? Letting us know, dark, Roman, and beautiful. And was the granddaughter of Mary Boleyn. Their son Robert, exceedingly handsome, and a future favorite of Elizabeth I, began attending college in 1579 at Cambridge at age 10, taking both his bachelor's and master's degrees, and becoming fluent in Greek and in Hebrew. While at Cambridge, he became friends with William Meyrick, probably from Hebrew name Meir. Among the family retainers was Anthony Bagot, another probable Sephardic name. When his close friend Sir Philip Sidney was killed fighting the Spanish in the Netherlands, remember, so these people are Protestants, they're coming together, they're Sephardic Jews, crypto-Muslims, they're fighting the Spanish, again, the Catholics. He got killed in Holland, the Netherlands. Robert married his widow. As historian Robert Lacey naively describes it, Robert Devereux paid court to Sidney's widow, Frances. It was a chivalrous, charmingly medieval conceit linked to the Old Testament tradition of brothers caring for each other's widows. That's why he took on the wife of his brother. And what were Sidney and Extus, if not brothers in arms? There seems no other good reason for such a match. The lady was not wealthy, and her father, Sir Francis Walsingham, was very near his end. In our view, such a marriage was sanctioned not because it was a quaint custom or conceit, but because of the Jewish ancestry of the three parties involved. It satisfied Levirate law, which required a Jewish male, if free, to marry his brother's widow, based on the Torah, Deuteronomy 25:5-10. Countless examples of this type of marriage can be adduced from the family histories of colonial American Jews, as well as we shall see in due course. Dr. John D. now. All right, we're almost done here today. I appreciate you guys tuning in. We're just trying to get through chapter 2. A lot of good info. A lot of info in this book. We try to get through it, as much as we can. Appreciate you guys in the chat. Thank you for tuning in. All right, we continue here. It says, Dr. John D. Without the talents of the Elizabethan academician John D., a brilliant polymath who claimed to be a magician, England's entry into the New World would assuredly have been second-rate. He was born in London in 1527. His father Roland was a textile merchant, and his mother Jane Wilde. He grew up near Lombard Street, the banking district named for the Italian and Jewish merchants who settled there in the 1100s. right? So we're talking about not just during Inquisition and Sephardic and Moorish Jews, going to England or these places. There was actually Jews there, so-called Jews there since the 1100s, 1200. Remember, they made a law in 1290. They had kicked them out. And again, yeah, these people are also people of color. We ain't talking about Ashkenazi Jews here in the 1100s. In 1547, John Dee became a professor of Greek at Cambridge, where one of his students was Sir Philip Sidney. Notably, Dee signed his name only with a Greek delta. The university was in the process of overhauling its curriculum to include, among other subjects, readings in Greek and Arabic mathematics. Much of Dee's research in astronomy, mathematics, and engineering was preserved through the efforts of Elias Ashmole, Hebrew or Arabic name, an antiquarian and Freemason, whom we will discuss at length when we return to Freemasonry in chapter 10. All right, so look forward to that chapter, right? This work was grounded in Hermetic ideas, Hermeticism, who created this Egyptology, Pan-African Egyptology, Hermetics based on Hermetics, Freemasonry Hermetics. Ideas then in the ascendancy in the Low Countries, which had recently received a rich intellectual infusion from Iberian conversos and Moriscos Moors following the expulsion of 1492, 1497, and 1540, and 1580. In June 1548, Dee moved to the University of Louvain, near Brussels, where he joined fellow Protestant humanist Roger Ascham, named after the Yorkshire village Ashcombe. Gemma Precious, Gemma, usually now a feminine name, is Arabic for the name of a star. And Gerard Mercator, example, merchant, Mercator means merchant, the translation for the Hebrew name Jacob, who were constructing, surveying, and navigational charts of the known world. Ashcombe wrote the schoolmaster regulating English grammar for the first time. Also in this brilliant milieu were Abraham Ortelius, an Italian cartographer believed to be a converso, Pedro Nunes, a Portuguese converso navigator, people who converted to Christianity from Muslim and Sephardic Jewish Jewry. John Sheck, William Cecil, and Duke of Northumberland. It was brilliant coterie of international savants, and if ever there was one. Dee was deeply involved in the Duke of Northumberland's attempts to place a Lady Jane Grey on England's throne, narrowly escaping the reprisals of Queen Mary. Suffering similar laws of their jobs or banishment were Dee's friends John Day, or Ned Diaz, a prominent printer, John Field, a publisher and astronomer, and Sir Thomas Burger, royal accountant and auditor. All were whispered to be part of a secret Protestant cell. Secret cryptos, Protestant cell. Sound like Huguenots to me. Huguenots, Confederation, they took an oath. Cluttered around Princess Elizabeth thing. She had a secret Protestant cell, right? Queen Elizabeth. And none of these was a John Philpott, Archdeacon of Winchester Cathedral, Norman surname from Greek Philippos. Philpott spoke and read Hebrew, had studied at Oxford University and traveled to Venice and Padua, both of which cities had robust converso and Morisco populations. Venice, Moorish, Padua, Moorish populations, Moors, a robust Moorish population. He refused to conduct mass as long as Mary was England's queen. Ultimately, he was burned at the stake. All right, another Morisco burn. Fox's Book of Martyrs recounts how Queen Mary's prosecutors cruelly imprisoned, tortured, and tried and executed Philpott at Smithfield near London, December 18, 1555. It was a case that might have been taken out of the pages of the Spanish Inquisition. He barely escaped the same fate, but survived until Elizabeth ascended to the throne, through the help, among others, of Robert Dudley, John Ashley, and Pedro Nunes, a Portuguese converso, mathematician, and cosmographer. Once Elizabeth was queen, he began to flaunt his Kabbalistic knowledge. As Elizabethan historian Woolley, perhaps disingenuously, writes, he had taught himself Hebrew and acquired Hebrew text. John, okay, so you see what he's pointing out? So when they tell the history of this guy, they're saying that the guy learned and taught himself Hebrew and acquired Hebrew text. No, he was Hebrew or Jewish. He was a Morisco Sephardic Moorish Jew. John Cheek had also advocated being fluent in both Hebrew and Greek. He went much deeper and began investigating gematria. Where does gematria come from? Look at that, gematria, the Kabbalistic Sephiroth, cryptology, and mathematics. You see, cryptology, gematria, Sephardic Moorish people creating this. By 1563, he was back in Antwerp, involved with secretive groups that invited all lovers of truth, of whatever nation and religious power they be, to become part of an intellectual brotherhood. What are we talking about here? Illuminati? Freemasonry? What's going on? Secret societies? What are we talking about here? He acted as a consultant of Sir Lionel Ducat, Lord Mayor of London, and Walter Raleigh, helping them oversee tin mines on Raleigh's property in Devonshire. It was his cartographic expertise that enabled the English Muscovy Trading Company to travel to 1,500 miles distance to reach Moscow and secure trade relations with Russian Tsar Ivan the Terrible. Russian Tsar Ivan. Who's this Ivan and what does he have to do with Genghis Khan? Who's this Ivan and what does he have to do, Ivan the Terrible, with Genghis Khan and Peter? Peter the Terrible, Peter the Great, Ivan. What's he got to do with Georgy Danilovich? 20 years later, he was collaborating with Martin Frobisher, Michael Locke, and Stephen Borrow in a zealous nationalistic campaign to find a northwest passage to China. In 1577, Dee published a remarkable book outlining a plan for building a worldwide British Empire, titled in brief General and Rare Memorials. Its frontispiece displayed Elizabeth I at the helm of a ship. Above her hung the sun, the moon, the stars, and a glowing spear bearing the Tetragrammaton, Hebrew anagram for God's name, Yahweh. All these emblems were symbols charged with Kabbalistic meaning, in vogue on the current writing of metaphysician Giordano Bruno and Platonist Pico della Mirandola in Italy. Now you see who's starting this whole Pan-African Hermetics. These households had become a popular meeting place for European intellectuals of probable Sephardic or Morisco descent who dabbled in magic. Mapmaker Abraham Ortelius, Alexander Simon, known as the Persian Ninevite, lawyer Richard Haglio, Simon Fernandez, the converso navigator for the Roanoke voyages, Sir Humphrey Gilbert, half-brother to Sir Walter Raleigh, and astronomer Thomas Harriot. Traveling to Bohemia in 1584, he was guest at the home of Thaddeus Hayek, or Hayek, astronomer and physician to Holy Roman Emperor Rudolph II. Hayek's father was the alchemist Simon Bacalar, who, like Thaddeus, bears an Arabic surname. The vice-chancellor to Emperor Rudolph was Jacob Kurtz, a botanist and astronomer. In our view, these royal courtiers, like Dee and several of his English and Dutch associates, were descendants of converso and Moors, exiles from Iberia. Moors, exiles from Iberia, all those people. We always thought they were white people. Break the spell. Richard Greenville. Yeah, we're almost done here. Greenville represents a transitional figure who will take us from England to North American shores. He was a Cornishman whose antecedents can be reliably traced back no further than 1513 in England. The family's name was originally spelled Greenfield in English and what? Campo Verde. That's what it means, Greenfield, Campo Verde. Campo Verde in Spanish, the latter being a Sephardic surname. So it became anglicized and became Greenfield, but it was Campo Verde. That's how they kept their crypto status. They married into the Curtani, Arundel, Aaron with the Theophoric, Vivian, Life, Chaim in Hebrew, St. Aubin, Gilbert, and Bonneville, Goodhouse families. Richard's father, Roger, was married to a cousin, Thomas St. Cole, near the Tavi, Tau, a Greek letter, and Tamar Rivers in Devonshire, Tamar. Richard himself married Mary St. Ledger, whose family was mentioned earlier. Other St. Ledgers in the same generation took spouses by the name of Stukeli, Bellew, and Termini. A generation earlier, we find the Greenvilles, Terminis, the Champerrouns, and Gilberts multiply, intermarried, including Raleighs forming a tidy-knit, markedly endogamous community in Cornwall. All right, all these Sephardic Moorish families keeping it together, keeping it in the family, married into each other. This continued as the colonizer came over to the United States. By 1545, Walter Raleigh had taken up his late half-brother Humphrey Gilbert's character, colonized North America for the English crown. The Air Force was strongly supported by Thomas and Richard Haglio, who wrote tracts on his behalf, as well as by Thomas Cavendish, Thomas Tarrage, and Ralph Ruffey, modeled on the Hebrew name Raphael Lane, as A.L. Rosie describes the venture. The little fleet which Greenville commanded consisted of 7 sails, the Tiger of 140 tons, a fleet boat called the Roebuck of the same burden, the Lion of 100 tons, the Elizabethan of 50 tons, and Dorothy, a small bark with 2 pinnacles for speedy service. There were aboard a number of gentlemen, mostly young men, who had volunteered to make trial of the new country. There was Ralph Lane, one of the Queen's equerries, whom Greenville appointed to take charge of the colony on his return. Thomas Cavendish, the brilliant young navigator who repeated Drake's exploit of circumnavigating the globe, was another. He was now 25, and it seems to have been his first introduction to the sea. Equally interesting was the presence of Thomas Harriot, who became the foremost scientist and mathematician in England. He was now about the same age as Cavendish, but unlike him, he remained a whole year in the new country under Lane's government, and later wrote the True Report of Virginia, a document full of close observation and scientific curiosity. Greenville took with him a considerable West Country contingent. There was Philip Amadas, right, Spanish, who remained under Lane as admiral of the country. John Arundel, Greenville's half-brother, his brother-in-law John Stukely, a Kendall, one of the predokes of Pasdo, a Courtenay, Anthony Rosie, the friend and later executor of Drake's will, along with others. So surely an otter group to assemble for high-risk colonizing expedition across the Atlantic cannot be imagined. So surely an otter or odd, like maybe an odd group, like these weird people from different backgrounds coming together, risk colonizing expeditions. Well, these people were family. Unless there was an overriding purpose for their efforts. Greenville, like Drake, Sidney, and Raleigh, participated in the Protestant colonization of Munster province in Ireland that proceeded hand in hand with England's drive towards the New World. Prior to joining the Irish campaigns, he put his estates in order in Cornwall and named as trustees Walter Raleigh, Sir Arthur Bassett, Sir Francis Godolphin, Henry Killigrew, Richard Bellow, Jewish surname, his brother-in-law John Haley, or Haley, a Sephardic Melungeon family mentioned earlier, Christopher Harris, in German, Hirsch, the biblical emblem of the tribe of Naphtali, and John Fassi, or Fassi, a Sephardic surname meaning from Fez, Morocco. Fassi, Fez, Morocco. Even his estate, should he die, to his son Bernard. In 1585, his daughter Mary wed her close cousin Arthur Tremonti, her cousin, keeping it in the family, remember, a traditional practice for both Sephardim and Moriscos, a traditional practice amongst Moors. Accompanying Greenville to Ireland for colonization were chiefly members of his own family circle. There was his second son, John, and there was his half-brother, John Arundel, whom had accompanied him on the Virginia voyage in 1585. Then there were Christopher Harris of Radford, who later married Greenville's daughter, Bridget, Thomas Stukely, who may have been brother of the John who went to on the 1585 voyage, and with Grenville's brother-in-law, John Bellew, another brother-in-law, John Fassy, who signed Grenville's family settlement as witness in 1586. And it says here, the last page, Grenville played a significant role in repelling the Spanish Armada 3 years later. He sailed with Captain Fanarin Cross, or Cruz, a common converso surname, as already mentioned, and a cousin James Arisi. Again, all these people kind of related or family or know each other or associated in some way. They're not just random Europeans going after Spain. He purchased supplies for that voyage from Harry, John, Richard, and Thomas jeweler, a Jewish occupation. Finally, in 1587, he was wounded in battle aboard his ship, the Revenge. Captured, he died speaking his final words in Spanish, "Here die I, having fought for country queen, religion, and honor." After his death, his son Bernard married Elizabeth Beeville on the edge of the moor overlooking Camel Valley. The moor on the edge of the marsh. Moor, another definition for moor, marsh maybe, marshy land, uncultivated land, overlooking the Camel Valley in Cornwall. The Grenville family changed its name once again in the 1600s to Granville. This became a popular boy's name among crypto-Jewish Appalachian families. We close this chapter in the hopes that the reader, all right, we're going to close today's video hoping that you guys listen to this, that you guys listen to me right now, are willing at least to entertain. I hope you guys are do more than just entertain, but yeah, at least willing to entertain the possibility that conversos and moriscos, Moors, right, Sephardic Jews and Moors were not only present and active, but also prominent and even dominant in important affairs in England, France, and the Netherlands during the 1500s. We're talking about, 500 years ago? 500 years ago? A lot can happen in 500 years, right? Their ranks included some of the most notable scientists, soldiers, and adventurers of that period. All eyes were now turned on a religious haven on the other side of the world. Even before the present age, America served as a magnet for those who suffered persecution at home. It was in England, with the assistance and vision and talents of Sephardic Jewish and their allies among crypto-Jewish British families, that the greatest aspirations were nurtured toward realization of this destiny. All right, big one. All right, that was a really good chapter. Verify the information. All right, Sephardic Moorish people, very prominent in the 1500s, already in England, France, and Holland. Moriscos, Moors. All right. Hope you guys enjoyed the presentation today.
Robin Trey, spies.